I'd probably say in the interest of time, let's just go ahead and get started and maybe let people trickle in as they join.
You think, Troy? Yeah.
Sounds good to me.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, we want to welcome everybody to this webinar on cybersecurity and identity fraud. We think it'll be prudent information given all that's going on in the world right now, and we thank you for your time. And I'd like to introduce Troy Wells, who's our Prudential annuity representative, has been for a very long time and has become a very good friend. And he also went to Penn State, so that also brings us a little bit closer. But Troy's been in the business a long time. He's been calling on us for a long time, and he's brought a tremendous speaker to us tonight. Tim, he'll introduce Tim in a minute, but they'll go over the webinar and the protocol for being able to ask questions. There will be an opportunity to ask questions at the end. So we hope everybody enjoys this, and I'm looking forward to it. Without further ado, here's Troy.
Great. Thank you, Damon. And good evening, folks. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule and joining us tonight. Again, my name is Troy Wells. I'm with Prudential Financial. And I want to thank Damon and Danielle for having us tonight. And more importantly, you folks joining us as well. As Damon alluded to, my relationship with Damon and Danielle and Accardi Financial is, I'm one of the companies that they work with where we provide a lot of retirement solutions, right? But Damon and Danielle, they were asking about some good educational material and, what's new these days in the industry. So there's a lot of good topics. And as Damon alluded to, we're fortunate we have gentleman Tim Santola with us tonight. He's one of our regional vice presidents for sales technology and advanced planning. And one of the cool topics, there's a lot of topics out there. There's Social Security, Medicare, Secure Act. There's all these good topics that we love to provide education to folks like yourself. But a hot one these days, and I'm sure a lot of us are hearing about it on the news, is identity theft and with a hidden risk behind that. So Prudential came up with a really good presentation on this. And our good buddy, Tim, travels all around the country, does these presentations, and he is joining us tonight from South Florida. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to Tim, and then we'll allow questions at the end, and we'll go from there. But again, thank you for your time, folks. Thank you for joining us. And without further ado, Tim Santola, if you can hear us, buddy, the floor is yours. Thank you.
I can hear you, sir, and I'll take right over and thank everybody for investing some of their early evening hours with us to talk about a pretty serious topic here. I can almost guarantee you'll take something out of this that can improve your financial future. So it's definitely a worthy investing of your time and your attention. And on behalf of Prudential, thank you for the opportunity to partner together with Accardi on this. This is a great relationship for ours and for us. And we really want to make sure whenever we get the opportunity to bring our absolute best for their clientele. So really excited to have this conversation. This is something that my team we built this presentation over 5 years ago, and we've put different coats of paint on it and tried to keep it up to speed because since COVID, this has become a gigantic problem. And it was really all centered around cyber attacks and breaches and all the hacked information. And we decided, everybody seems to know that there's a lot of hacks out there going on all the time. The conversation is really more about risk. It's really all about, what are we doing to protect ourselves from what I'll call the hidden risk out there. You work with your advisors and you make sure that you have strategies for downside protection in the market or life insurance, or, they keep you honest when you want to make a panic move in the market because the headlines, say this or that. And that's all really the recommended approach is to partner with a top advisor. But a lot of the other things that we need to handle in terms of protecting ourselves and our assets fall back on our own shoulders in today's world. And there's a tremendous amount of downside that can come with volunteering or having your assets stolen right out from under you through fraud. So Prudential wants to provide this education as purely a public service announcement. And, we have no sort of skin in the game in terms of a product or a sale here. It's purely just an educational effort to let people know about the hidden risk. And fraud is what I'll call the hidden risk. It's a $50 to $100 billion a year problem that a lot of folks aren't paying enough attention to. And I can almost guarantee you everybody on the phone either has a personal anecdote about this or they know someone or have heard a story about, you know, a disaster that has happened with some sort of a crazy fraud interaction with their life. I hear these things all over the country from folks from all shapes and sizes and walks of life that, you know, they've got this intersection with fraud and with identity theft, and they're getting the pretty creative and pretty convincing these days. So what we want to do is talk about, you know, how did we get to the point where this is such a big present factor in our lives, and then how do we actually go about protecting ourselves, and what are some strategies that we can use to make sure that we don't fall victim like all the statistics that we hear. So let's zoom out and we'll talk about risk. And here is, in a vacuum, what we all would like to accomplish, right? We're working, we're earning income, we're rising through, you know, climbing the ladder, rising the ranks, trying to accumulate assets and save our 10 or 15, 20%, however much we can squirrel away. We work and we're partner with our advisors to invest that wisely. It grows, and then we turn it into income and hit the golf course and sail off into the sunset in retirement, right? I would say, you know, not so fast. That's a little bit of a fantasy fairy tale of how this should all go. In reality, we're up against risks all the time. There's systematic and unsystematic risks, fancy technical inside baseball financial terms for the things that can go bump in the night with our investments. We can have tax changes, which is in the headlines as of today. We could be invested in a company and all of a sudden their product is not the best thing in the world anymore, and the competition is beating them and they can't hit their numbers and the share price goes down. And then when we get to retirement, we could live too long and not have enough money, or we could retire into a down market and all of a sudden our projections for how much income we can use are completely out the window. So along the entire timeline there, we're faced with risk, and it's our job, and thankfully you partner with great advisors that help you with strategies to actually combat this and confront it along the way. We've got diversification. I'm sure you've all heard of that. You know, don't put all of your eggs in one basket. Make sure that you're spread around, and that, you know, not one a particular risk can completely knock you off course. Over at Prudential, we offer what we call buffered investments, or situations where you can have downside protection so that if the market goes down, Prudential will refund some or all of the losses so that you can smoothen out the ride and reduce volatility. We've got financial planning, obviously. You know, you partner with the Accardi Group and you say, you know, here's what I'd like to accomplish, and let's put the ducks in a row to actually make a plan, and we'll check in on this thing along the course and adjust as necessary so that we can manage all of these risks. Mr. Buffett's quote over here is a great one to you know, always be thinking about. He said, you know, rule number one is never to lose money, and rule number two is don't forget rule number one. It's like a sort of like a Fight Club kind of a saying that, you know, don't lose money is half the battle when you're trying to make it successfully to your financial goals. And by and large, the American public is kind of worried about a lot of the right things. This is a look at, if you were to poll the average American consumer, what are they most worried about? Inflation. All of a sudden, the last few years, cost of living went up dramatically. Housing costs. It's extremely, you know, tough, especially in New England, to put a roof over your head these days. Recession. This is all we hear about all the time now is, are we in a recession? When's it coming? I can't pay my medical bills. Interest is too high. So we've got the right idea, but you don't see on this list is something that is coming across the table of many Americans and growing exponentially every year, is that hidden risk, which is fraud. So I'll direct you down to the bottom of this slide and we'll work our way up. 15%. That number I put on this slide because that is the actual average long-term probability going back, you know, hundreds of years with this country now. In any given year, it's a 15% chance that the US will fall into a recession. And that's that big word that we all get worried about. And, you know, it seems to keep a lot of people up at night, and it's a constant topic of conversation. Meanwhile, about 1/3 of Americans have experienced identity theft. More than 9 million are falling victim each year. And the size and the scale of this thing is growing at 13% year over year. A 13% return on investment every single year, you'd be completely happy and you know, made in the shade for quite some time if you could get that on your investments. That's the kind of exponential growth that you're seeing in the identity theft space. which is now ballooning up to something close to $100 billion problem. That number there is 43, but a lot of this is either unreported or really unidentified. That's leaking out of the back pocket of our economy due to fraud. So I'll ask you, what is more likely, that a dramatic recession is going to come along all of a sudden and wipe us out, or we're going to end up like the other 1/3 of Americans that have actually fallen victim to this identity theft? And the reason for this is going back to the data breaches that we were originally centering this conversation around. We've got a gigantic problem over the last, I would say, almost 10 years at this point now, where the internet has become ever present in our lives. It's in our hands all the time. We use it for everything, but it's almost working against us because we have all of our data connected into there, and we really do not have the right ways of keeping it safe. And a lot of our information is falling by the wayside out onto what we could call the dark web, where folks are transacting in sensitive data points about our identities for circumstances as little as $4 a pop to buy your social security number. So the slide that you see up here will talk about the Equifax data breach in 2017. This used to be the granddaddy of all cyber attacks. This was one of the big three credit bureaus getting hacked and spilling the beans on 145 million Americans' keys to the kingdom: social security, date of birth, address, name. This was the big one until last year. We found out about national public data, something that I had never even heard of until last year, but they leaked out another 272 million Americans' information. Oh, and 2.9 billion social security numbers. I think that is the total of basically everyone that's ever had an SS number, that they were all tracked in this database, and now that's gone and on the dark web. So between those two, it is almost a certainty that your social security number has been exposed, along with a ton of other sensitive details. And there's a huge market internationally and interconnected online that folks are trading and transacting in your details, and folks are looking to cash in on your information. So when we look at this and say, man, this is a huge mess and it's getting out of control and there's nothing I can do, the stats will actually tell us otherwise, that there's a lot more of this that's within our control than we may think. The actual use of the stolen data or things beyond our control is only about a quarter of the fraud. 3/4 of this comes from things like us clicking on suspicious text messages or posting, information that could reveal our data and our sensitive information across social media. And a lot of this can be cleaned up, and a lot of the risk can be reduced if we implement the best practices and the habits that I'll go through in just a couple of minutes here to, get your arms around and you wrap your head around, how do I best protect myself from revealing too much and taking the wrong steps and falling victim like so many people have. So the culmination of all of this is going back to that diversification pie chart. You think about spreading your assets and making sure that you're not putting all your eggs in one basket. We kind of need to cover all of the different bases of our identity all at once with this diversified attention span. You got to think about your social security and your IRS.gov account, and now your social media and your bank accounts, your credit cards. We basically have to diversify our protection and use the diversified set of different habits and best practices to work together to help to reduce our risk. So let's talk about exactly what we're going to start thinking about for those strategies. And what I'll do is go through sort of a rapid fire, a couple examples here and there of things to look out for, resources to be aware of, and really the best things you can do to protect yourself. And I think of this as, the culmination of all of these efforts. It's not going to be a silver bullet, but it will do a lot to make sure that you are not going to be a soft target and you're not getting in your own way. So the first category are those things that we need to know about and raise a little bit more awareness on. The first thing you got to know is that it's not all sci-fi and hacking and computers and millions of data records and breaches and cyber attacks. The mail is still a big problem here. And a lot of the threats are coming from the Postal Service delivering us sensitive information and folks getting that out of the mail or out of our trash and using the internet maybe to connect the dots, or, trying to apply for credit using something they took out of your mail. And we've got to think about how we can treat the mail a little bit differently. Can you go on optoutprescreen.com and remove yourself from the pre-approved credit card offers and those mailing lists? Can you buy a shredder and make sure that when you have maybe some of these things in your house, when they come into the house, they leave the house in a million pieces after they went through the shredder? So thinking about the amount of risk in the physical realm and not getting caught up in the tech side of this is an important step in understanding that, there's risk that occurs across a low tech to no tech to high tech sort of a spectrum. And we can't just get too hung up thinking about our phone and our data and the internet. The next thing we need to know is what's already out there. What beans have already been spilt according to our specific information? And you've got a resource for that. This is called haveibeenpwned.com. Kind of a wacky name, but what this is an internet resource where you can go on and enter your email address or your phone number. And what they will do is go through and search a database of hacked information and see what aligns with your identity. And it's a great way to go out and say, here's the mess that already exists, and I've got to go and clean that up. And check in all the time to make sure that, new stuff hasn't gotten leaked. The next thing we need to know is that phishing is no longer just phishing, it's phishing and smishing. And I always like to play a little pop quiz on people and try to get you to guess what smishing is. If phishing is SMS text, is email, I spilled the beans on that one by accident. SMS text messaging is smishing, and email is generally associated with phishing. They're all the same thing. They're coordinated cyber messages that go out in mass to hundreds of thousands or millions of people, trying to get you to do something. They're trying to get you to take action and respond to that message by clicking a link, by downloading a file, by responding with sensitive information. So we're not really ever going to stop getting these messages, but what we need to do is stop acting on them. And I'll give you a couple things to look out for when you get these messages. The latest and greatest in smishing, and I don't know if you've seen these, but I'm getting them down in Florida, are the unpaid toll notice text messages that you get. And it might say, your Easy Pass or whatever, the Sun Pass, you have unpaid tolls on these roads. Here's a website, put in your credit card and get yourself in good standing with the state. And they basically just steal your credit card. Or you get shipping notifications for packages that you probably didn't even buy off the internet, and they just get mixed in with the normal flow of your messages. So be particular, have those on your radar and pay particular attention to those types of text messages. And then just double check and triple check email messages that are looking to get you to do something. Is the message generically addressed? Is the email address maybe has a typo in it, or it's not exactly what you would expect coming from Prudential Financial, Timothy Dotson-Tolo. Maybe it's a whole long string of numbers and letters. So these are all these kind of things that you can use to just take a pause and make sure that you've got a legitimate message that's coming in before you take action. Next thing we've got to know is that our phones are not only a tremendous store of sensitive information about us, they're producing more and more and more of it on a second by second basis. So two quick things to think about there is, number one, make sure that you've got a password on the actual device itself. You can't let it fall out of your pocket, getting out of an airplane or out of an Uber, and have somebody be able to pick it up and swipe up and get into your phone. That's disastrous. In addition to that, are you thinking about what kind of permissions you're sharing with what apps on your device? So you've got your location services, and you can go into say an iPhone and pop the hood and look into the settings and the preferences and your privacy and see what kind of information is this device tracking on me. We just spent maybe 10 minutes talking about how poor of a job all of these things, all these companies and businesses are doing at protecting our data. it's going to end up on the dark web at one point, and we want to make sure that we're reducing our footprint whenever we get the opportunity to. So there's an app privacy report that you can actually go through and see, does my Sudoku game actually need to track my location 24/7 down to my doorstep? Or maybe I'd get the same experience if I were to just turn that off and I could still play my crossword game. So things like this are all just good to put on the radar, and good to know that there's the ability in there to sort of go out and reel back in some of the permissions that we're allowing. All right, next up here, the things that we need to proactively monitor to make sure that we are keeping an eye on the right things and using right habits to prevent our risk from getting catastrophic. So social media is a big one. Statistically, you are way higher likelihood to fall victim to identity theft if you're a social media user. And this goes back to the volunteering of sensitive information. It's posting things with, I don't know, maybe a picture of the car, the make and model of the vehicle with the license plate number, or the address where it's parked at, or the kids' names, the pets' names, the high school mascot, the graduation date, the anniversary date when you got married. All these different types of information that are key components of our lives, things that we want to share with our friends and our loved ones. They're ending up on social media, and a lot of times there's people out there that are looking to kind of connect the dots and piece things together. And these are a great resource for those folks. A lot of times they're components of our passwords, or they're the answers to the I forgot my password questions that you get asked when you have to just try to reset a forgotten password. And if you've got 2 or 3 of those, you might as well have the password. So that's a huge source of risk, is oversharing sensitive information and volunteering it on social media. An offshoot of this is the dating side of social media. So you got, people of all ages all across the world getting to know each other online using these different apps and platforms. And a lot of folks are falling victim to scams. And this is one of the most dramatic downsides of any type of identity theft or fraud, because what you're typically doing in these instances is going out of your way to send your resources or your information to someone else. It's not the bank getting robbed, the credit card getting exposed, or something else that can be recoverable, or there's insurance, or it's built into the way that the business works. It's you sending your own cash a lot of the time, and there's no remediation on that. It's too bad, so sad sort of a thing. So really need to be careful that, if you're talking to people on one of these platforms, go through whatever steps you can to actually verify that people are who they say that they are. Similar conversation is people just pretending to be somebody that they're not. And I hear this all the time. I got a phone call and it sounded like my grandson, and he was down in Mexico and he crashed a rental car and he needs 10 grand, or they're going to put him in, the Mexican prison, and we got to bribe somebody, and I need a transfer quick. And similar stories that pop up like this. And the theme there is the acting on a sense of urgency and capitalizing on the panic of the recipient. They want you to make a decision that's brash and urgent, and you panic and you just throw money at the problem because the situation is dire. The FBI is calling me and threatening me. The IRS says that I'm going to go to jail if I don't pay X amount of back taxes. When in doubt, take a step, hang up the phone, or call back the local field office, or do the Google search and try to find the legitimate way to contact these people. More likely than not, when one of these things pops up, it's going to be fraudulent, and we need to make sure that we can take a second before we get ourselves into trouble. Credit card fraud is actually on the decline thanks to the chips that they put in our cards. I don't know how long ago that happened. It feels like it's been a long time now, but the chip actually encrypts the transaction. When you tap the chip or dip the chip, your 16-digit credit card number is no longer being fully sent across the magnetic strip, and it's a great way to encrypt that transaction. However, the thing to monitor here in the monitor category are the situations where folks get themselves into trouble, where you physically part with the credit card. Bars and restaurants, fast food drive-through windows, other situations, gas stations, where you're handing the card over to somebody else and everybody in the country seems to have a high definition smartphone camera glued to their hand at every moment now. Very easy for somebody to take a picture of both sides of the card, swipe it, and hand you a Big Mac, and all of a sudden they've got your credit card. So be vigilant in those scenarios and keep an eye out for the potential for your credit card to be jeopardized in those specific settings. Now, your credit report, something to monitor. The question is, where do you go to monitor it? We hear these different services advertised, free credit report and Credit Karma and the like. Annualcreditreport.com is the freecreditreport.com. This is the one that is authorized by federal law and is the only source of your credit report free with no strings attached. So if you never want to, end up in a situation where you're sold something afterwards, or that you don't know what's going on with the data after you give it to them, this is the one way to get your credit report and make sure that you see everything in there periodically and it's all up to par, or else dispute and file those complaints with the credit bureaus to try to get those items remediated or off of your credit. All right, finally here, the last section of what do we need to do to make sure that we are in the best defensive situation as possible? The biggest thing is your passwords. There's 23 million people in this country that use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as their password. And you wonder why a third of us have fallen victim to identity theft. We have terrible password etiquette. And here's my 3 components of good password etiquette. Number 1, keep it secret. Don't expose it. Don't put it on a sticky note and tape it to the side of your computer monitor. Don't put it on the fridge. Don't carry it around, on a notepad or in your wallet or your purse or something. Keep it secret. Don't let anybody come across that information. Complexity is the second thing, because with enough complexity, you can keep a human, but also a computer, from guessing the password. Jellyfish 10 there, my sample password, would take 150 plus years for an algorithm to crack. And that's the kind of complexity that we want to make sure we have as a minimum. Variety is the big one, is having different passwords for all of your accounts and updating them frequently. And people say, well, I've got 100, 200 different accounts. How do I make, sense of all of this without being a genius and having, a photographic memory? You can use your resources like a 1Password or a Keeper, or another reputable password manager. But the real thing to keep in mind is, if you're going to put all of your eggs in one basket for your passwords, make sure that the password to the password manager is Fort Knox, that you've got the most complexity, the most secrecy, and you've got your multi-factor authentication turned on. This is your backup plan to your passwords. This is that step where you got to get up off the couch and find your phone because they texted you the code and the code's going to expire, and you've got to, type it in or cut and paste it. That chore is something that I would embrace, and I would in fact seek that out in all of your different settings and preferences and security for all your accounts. See if it's available to turn on. A lot of times it's something that you have to kind of hunt out to turn on, and it's not going to be a default setting, but it will dramatically increase your security if and when that password gets exposed. Now, we talked about checking your credit. I would say having one of these services is equally, if not more, important and impactful than checking your credit at annualcreditreport.com. Having a service that watches your back 24/7, 365 in terms of a credit monitoring or ID theft protection service is, I would say, way better, because there's just too much fraud out there now that we have to make sure that we have something that is keeping an eye out for us and alerting us if things go bump in the night. So these are all great services. They all basically do the same thing, is just keep an eye on your credit and your identity and other accounts that you can connect in. And when things change, they let you know. And then it's kind of a, hey, is this, a bad enough thing that I have to actually, throw the challenge flag and see what I can do to figure it out. Now, the government accounts are a big one, because our unique identifier, our sacred social security number, is no longer worth any, because they've all been exposed. So if you think about it, the government has many problems on their hands, as always, but they've got a big one where they can't really figure out how to get out of this mess with Social Security and IRS, because that's the way that we use our identity is tied to our Social Security number, really more than anything else. So the government recommendation directly from Uncle Sam is, I need you to keep an eye on this for me until we can get our arms wrapped around this thing. And I don't really have any faith in them doing that anytime soon. So their recommendation is, if you don't already have these accounts, go online to Social Security Administration and IRS.gov, create an account. If something looks fishy in there, if he says you're taking Social Security benefits, but you haven't started taking them yet, give them a call. If your IRS account, the bank, the direct deposit number on your tax refund looks different than your actual bank account, give them a call. So it's kind of a, you need to keep an eye on it for the government situation, check it frequently, use a strong password, cross your fingers and hope for the best sort of a situation. But that's where we're at with all of the Social Security fraud that's been going on. Finally, here is what I think is probably one of the most powerful things you can do, is keeping your credit frozen and thawing it out strategically so that you use your credit in small windows, or you expose your credit in small windows instead of 365 days a year. So what I'm talking about here is getting in touch with each one of the credit bureaus. To freeze and unfreeze, you need to go to each TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax individually. They're all separate entities, and request that you get your credit frozen. And the beauty of this is that it's a free service now, but you can also schedule a temporary thaw to have your credit unfrozen for a predetermined amount of time. Go ahead and make your loan application, buy the car, or apply for the loan, whatever it is, and then automatically have the credit go back into the freezer at the end of that window. So it's a beautiful new system where you can predetermine the amount of exposure that you want and keep the constant state as frozen, so no one can use your credit on your behalf, and be able to have, I don't know, maybe a 48-hour window where you go and hit the car dealership and pass the papers, and then just rest easy knowing that your credit's going to go right back into the freezer automatically because you told the credit bureaus online that's what you wanted to have as a temporary freeze. So I think that's a fantastic thing. If you can handle going to the 3 different websites and creating a username, authenticating yourself, going to find the button for freezing and unfreezing, and going through the steps, I really think it's powerful, because no one can use your credit on your behalf if you have it frozen. So finally here, we went through a lot in a pretty short amount of time, and I want to make sure we put a bow on it, and I give you the most impactful things that I would recommend personally as what you could do to get yourself as protected as possible. On the left-hand side there, I think every American needs to have 6 online accounts at a minimum. The bottom 3 we just went through, the credit bureaus. If you think it will make sense to you and you can handle the freezing and unfreezing, keep your credit frozen and then strategically temporarily lift the freeze when you need to use it, so that you're reducing your window way smaller than what it normally might be. The next 2 are direct recommendations of the government of, hey, do us a favor and keep an eye out for Social Security and tax fraud, because we've got a big mess on our hands with the Social Security numbers. And then, of course, hiring some help to watch your back 365 days a year as a credit monitoring ID theft protection service. If you've got those 6 accounts and you pay particular attention to the big high value targets that can get you in big trouble if someone gets into them, your Apple ID, your Microsoft, sort of those mothership technology accounts, your email, your financial accounts, even your cell phone carrier, if you have those locked down with a very strong password and turned on your multi-factor authentication, and you use good passwords everywhere else, you don't click on suspicious links, you don't overshare on social media, you verify that people are who they say that they are, you don't act with urgency and panic when something pops up, and you think twice about the messages that you receive, this really is the best you can do in today's world. And I think that you'll become a hardened target. And there's a lot more people out there with sort of bad etiquette when it comes to protecting themselves, that the bad actors of the world will move quickly away from you, and and onto someone else, and you'll avoid that hidden risk the best that you possibly can. So there's no silver bullet, but this is what my research has found as probably the best collection of.
Tim, we may have lost you for a second.
Have a window, and I will see if I can have those slides pull up for the Q. And a thank you on behalf of Prudential with our important disclosures and the good old rock logo. So thank you very much on behalf of Prudential for the opportunity to bring this information, and to Accardi and that group. We really appreciate the partnership. Any questions from the chat? I'd be happy to take those right now.
Yeah, Danielle, if you see anything, let us know. That'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Troy. If anybody has any questions, if you just use the chat feature, we'll be able to get those answered for you.
I told them all they need to know. It's
There
great.
you go.
Lots
No,
of
it's very,
information.
very eye-opening. Every time I listen to this, I learn a little bit more. So it's very good. It's something.
I have a
that,
question.
Sure.
So you mentioned the chips in the credit card and how tapping the card is safer than swiping the card. So does that also include when they make you push the card in at the grocery store or at the gas station long ways? Or should you
Yeah, I
be
think if I had to
Apple
rank
Pay?
them, I would say actually the what is proven to be the safest is using the phone with like an Apple Pay, because when you do that double click and it pays through the phone, it's actually got the card into Apple Pay, which Apple Pay then encrypts it again, and it's touch free. So that is probably the
Okay.
highest level of consumer protection. Second on the list would be tapping the card, because you're not actually inserting it into anything that could skim the information. I'd say third is dipping the chip. You're still using the chip primarily, but it's inserted into something which may or may not be able to, have a skimmer built into it. And then the last, and probably the one I would avoid, is the swiping of the magnetic strip, the old school way of doing it. That's where, you see these videos online where somebody puts like a mechanism on top of the card swiper, or they put it into the gas pump, and you can kind of see people wiggle those. If you're gonna do one of those swipes, give it a little jiggle and see if something is out of place there. That might be a good way to find a skimmer. But at the end of the day, with credit cards, you're only ever going to be legally on the hook for $25 max per card per instance of fraud. So
Wow.
don't lose sleep over the credit cards, because it's part of your consumer protections that the credit card companies have this budgeted as part of their risk. That's why they charge you 30% interest, that there's X amount of fraud that they know that they're going to encounter every year. So I always tell people, save the debit card for pulling cash out of an ATM only. Use American Express's money, use Capital One's money. And if they ever try to, scare you into thinking, oh, I got a big fraud situation on my hands, I owe them 10 grand that I didn't use, your consumer protections, it will limit that to $25 at each time. It's more of an inconvenience of the card gets stolen. Now I've got to reset all my automatic pays. I've got to re-upload it into my phone. My expiration date's different. That's really most of the heartache that you go through when losing a credit card. Or it could open you up to subsequent fraud too, once they've got sort of a 1 foot in the door. But always good to keep an eye out for those swipe situations.
Hey, Tim, I have a question, kind of piggybacking on that. On credit cards, there's usually an option for, hey, I think I lost my card. I'm going to temporarily freeze the card. You leave the restaurant and you go, oh no, where's my card? Is that helpful, or is that?
Totally, yeah. And I think a lot of people don't even know that exists. So the other day I couldn't find my wallet, and I went and opened up my phone. I froze all my cards.
Mhm.
And then eventually, my kid put it under the pillow or something and we found it. But I didn't have to go out and reorder all the cards and have to jump through all those hoops and wait for them to come in the mail. You can freeze them. On Capital One cards, you can actually lock the card, similar to freezing your credit. So like we had a Capital One Visa that we needed to use to go to Costco, because they only take Visa at Costco. and I don't use the card for anything else but that. So unless I open up my phone and authenticate into the app and hit the button and unlock the card,
Yep.
no one can use that card unless they jump through those hoops. So it's very similar to like freezing and unfreezing your credit, but
Mhm.
on an account by account basis. And there's just a lot of resources hiding out in those mobile apps that folks need to take a look at and take full advantage of.
That's great.
Great information.
Great
Any
information.
any more questions in the queue, Danielle?
I don't see anything here. I think
Yeah.
you've given them a lot of information, so
Yeah.
thank you very much.
Very good.
Thank you,
Tim,
Tim and Troy. Thank you guys very much.
Yeah, thanks, Damon and Danielle, and folks for joining. I mean, for the fact that Damon and Danielle want to provide this information is awesome, right? It's not just about financial planning every day. What they do very well, it's bringing good education to their clients, and they care about you. So we appreciate the opportunity as well, folks. So and Tim, thank you from South Florida, and all the best, buddy. And everybody have a. At this point, we'll cut it off, and we'll end the session and want everybody to have a safe and happy Memorial Day. Hopefully the sun comes out here in New England. But Damon, I'll turn it back to you, buddy, too. Anything else you need? Or
Tim and Troy, thank you from Prudential. We appreciate the information, very helpful. We do, for our clients that are still listening, we are recording this, and we're going to make this available to friends and family. And anybody that you want to share it with, we'll have a method of that. It might be on the website, but if you'd like that, or you want us to send it to someone, please let us know. This was great information. Other than that, everybody have a great night. Thank you guys again, and have a great night.
thanks, folks. Thank you.
Thank you, folks. Take care.